So that concludes the staff presentation. So now we'll open it up to public testimony. So if again you desire to come up, would you make your way up to the podium one at a time? Try as hard as you can to observe the 3-minute rule. And also, I mean, this has been great so far. It's been very orderly. Thank you very much. Let's see if we can keep it that way during testimony. Somebody's going to say something that you like. I don't want to hear applause or cheers or anything. Or if somebody says something you don't like, I don't want to hear boos or whatever. That's disorderly conduct in this proceeding. So let's see if we proceed that way, and we'll see if we keep it in control. All right? So anyone who would like to come up to the podium, please start your way up there and give us your name and address for the record, and let us know what's on your mind.
Hi, my name is Ken Norris, and my address is 280 Rustic Way, Spirit Lake.
Go ahead.
I'm questioning why we're permitting vehicles. I thought that was state's proprietary. And I'm coming at it from a perspective as I have had my property for sale for a little while, and on that property I have an RV, and my realtor said, why don't we try and sell your RV at the same time? And the title company came back and said, you're not allowed to do that, which means an RV should not be a permanent part of any property. It's kind of inherent in the title, it's a vehicle. So I'm, as a landowner, I'm asking, could you consider maybe not trying to stick me for a little more money? I'd appreciate it.
So what we're going to do with these, any question that's raised, staff's writing it down, we're writing it down.
All right.
We'll give the staff time. Particularly this one, we certainly have discussed that in the context of the tiny homes issue, because it comes down to the same thing. Is it real property? Is it not? It's
understandable.
So we'll, if you would allow us in the response. Okay.
I would also like to say to all of you, thank you for listening to us, the public, and trying, obviously, very diligently to come up with something that meets both of our needs. That means a lot to me as a member of this county.
And that's exactly why we're here. This is a public process, so we don't.
Thank you.
We're not so smart that we can figure it all out with everybody's comments.
I did notice one of the considerations was a 5-foot setback from state lands. If I'm not mistaken, the state on occasion will do a land swap with private entities such as Stimson or other lumber companies. Is that correct?
That's been known to happen.
Should that happen, would that 5-foot setback suddenly change and cause a landowner to be out of compliance because of a deal made that they may most likely be unaware of?
Okay, that'll be a look for a response from staff on that.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for testifying. Okay, anyone else? Howdy.
Michael Gully, live on Lower Manley Creek Road in Laclede. Many people come to Idaho for the freedoms and liberties they believe exist here. Idaho is seen as one of the few remaining places a family can purchase raw land, set up their homestead, and begin the process of development while they live on the land they own. When I first looked for land to purchase in Bonner County, I actually specifically passed on some properties with CC&Rs, which specified how long I could live in an RV while I built a house. I'm building in cash, not with loans, and so I knew it would take me more than a year to build a traditional home. The rhetorical question I want everyone to consider tonight is this: is securing for yourself and family a home for shelter and safety on your own land a right or a liberty, or is it a privilege which is not afforded to all property owners? The writers of our Constitution seem to presume that people had homes or shelters when they wrote the Bill of Rights. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects, etc. The presumption is that people had houses. The Constitution of the State of Idaho says in Article 1, Section 1, Inalienable Rights of Man, all men are by nature free and equal and have certain inalienable rights, among which are enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, pursuing happiness, and securing safety. How can one secure safety on the property they own if they cannot provide the basic necessity of shelter for them and their family? Remember the rhetorical question I wanted you all to consider tonight. Is it securing for yourself and family a shelter and safety on your own land a right, or is it a liberty, or is it a privilege which is not afforded to all property owners? There are actually 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases, Shuttleworth versus City of Birmingham, 1963. If the state converts a right or liberty into a privilege, the citizen can ignore the license and fee and engage in the right liberty with impunity. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania, 1943. No state shall convert a right into a license and charge a fee therefor. As private property owners, we should not need to apply for the county's permission or permit to secure for ourselves and our families safety in the form of shelter on our property. RVs do serve as shelter and provide safety from the elements as well as local wildlife. Of course, within a pro-private property rights regime, individuals need the ability to exclude others from the use and benefits of their own private property. Beyond the right of acquiring property, there is also the right of sole dominion, as also described as the right to exclude others, a right against trespass, or a right of quiet enjoyment, which all can exercise equally at the same time, and also the right of active use, at least to the point where such use violates the rights of others to quiet enjoyment. Just where that point is will vary depending on the facts, of course, and that makes it the business of courts to determine. It's good for legislators, federal, state, and county to draw the broad outlines for that. Given our current permitting regime, however, the point to be noticed here is that I am instead advocating for free use of private property. People should not be required to obtain a permit or permission before using their property. That is, just as people today are not required to obtain a permit before speaking. Rather, the burden should be on those who object to a given use to show how it violates a right of theirs. This amounts to having to show that their neighbor's use takes something they own free and clear. If they fail to show that, the use should continue. So what I'm advocating for is the right of active use of our own private properties without needless regulations, permits, and code enforcement, at least to the point where such use violates the rights of others. In other words, I'm asking for a county which upholds the rights of private property owners to use their property freely until they actually encroach on the property rights of others, as opposed to a county which attempts to defend private property rights through permits, fees, and policing. As such, I'm requesting the removal of Note 11 from Bonner County Revised Code 12332, no creation of a 12801 definition, and no creation of a section 12496. And just to be clear, I am not addressing the regulation of commercial RV parks in that. Thank you.
Please, none of that.
Mike Gully,
Mike.
I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tracy Roberts. My address is 600 Camelot Lane, East River, Idaho. I want to initially say thank you very much. I do realize that the Planning Commission is listening to us and that they are trying to work with us, and we very much appreciate that. I also want to echo Mike's comments that what I'm remarking here is only about the residential changes to the amendment that we're talking about. So I've got 2 different things I'd like to discuss. The first part is we as a group of affiliated people who know each other through the county have come up with a petition. It's very informal. We circulated among ourselves to see how much support we had for our position on this. I won't read you the whole petition. I will read the last little summary statement, and I'll let you know that we had 198 signatures gathered in the course of about 7 days on that, just to give an idea of what sort of support our statements have here. So the basic summary was that we consider this type of administrative action to be recursive and would only increase the tax burden for the citizens of the county. Rather than implement the changes proposed in AM 0007-19, we propose the removal of Note 11 from BCRC 12-332 and recommend a more reasonable and mutually beneficial amendment to the BCRC elements that relate to the use of recreational vehicles in a commercial setting to be proposed at a future date. So that is what they came up with as a group regarding this petition. I would also go further and personally say that And echoing again Mr. Gully's statements, many of us here are looking for less regulation, not more regulation. We came here to this county, or hopefully a lot of people were born here and had the joy and pleasure and privilege of living here your whole lives. And we appreciate that it's a free place. It's a place that's known for its liberty. We had a meeting just a couple of weeks ago with one of the county commissioners. He told us that he is actively working and that you guys are actively working to reduce the already bloated and cumbersome county code, and we appreciate that, and that's what we want to see. So we would like to see less code, not more. We would like to see Note 11 completely removed and not add any additional regulation, no additional definitions, no additional standards to be complied with. Secondly, we want to point out that if the people do want more regulation on the use of recreational vehicle, specifically it sounds like you're trying to contain it as the occupancy as a full-time residential dwelling unit. The language that you proposed here is not clear. The terms of the use of a parking space, when you're talking about a vehicle, that becomes very unclear. It sounds like Milton already said that you have process to turn an RV into a permanent dwelling unit. We can continue with that process without having to add additionals. The terms of saying a parking space is unclear. The word of the use of a recreational vehicle is very unclear. Recreational vehicle can be used as a recreational vehicle, as a temporary shelter, as a chicken house, as a permanent dwelling. It's too ambiguous. So we would ask, again, that we not add anything to the code at this time, certainly not until you can get much more clear and precise language. And overall, we would like to see less regulation. Strike Note 11, do not add anything more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Sandy Nicholson, West Pine Street, Dover. I have a clarifying question really quick for you, Milton. Is what you presented today the same that was online a couple days ago? It looks a little bit different.
It's a little bit different.
Okay. So, and then another clarifying question is what you're proposing essentially with the RVs, I think on the residential, essentially to double what is already allowed?
1 to 2.
1 to 2, okay. So my question for you is, and with respect to each of you and your individual property rights, the preamble to the Constitution also calls for us to oversee our posterity. And for me, that is our soil, our water, our air, things like that for our children, for future generations, and for the whole community. And so I just have one question for planning and zoning to please consider, and I do appreciate all your consideration. And that is, how are you measuring the cumulative effects of doubling what it already is? And when we live in a data-driven society, what are the qualifications of who you're using to get those cumulative effect reports to you? That's what I would ask you to consider in doubling what is already allowed.
Thank you. And were you
Yes,
on your way?
yes,
Okay.
I was.
There you go.
So I'm Catherine Kohlberg. I'm with Panhandle Health District. I did submit a letter in response to the request for comments from the county. I would like people to know that Panhandle Health is really just a neutral party in this conversation. The main point I would like people to understand is that we would like to be an effective part of this conversation. The main thing that Panhandle Health is here for is to manage the wastewater disposal that occurs, especially as Bonner County is growing and developing. So any type of regulations that are revolving around wastewater disposal are at the state level at this point. Like I said, Panhandle Health is neutral in regards to this specific issue, other than we really do want people to understand that we want to be a part of the conversation. And we're here, we've got a ton of options for wastewater disposal. You could have dry RVs, or you could have RVs that have water to them. Just because an RV has a water source doesn't mean they necessarily have to have an on-site wastewater disposal system on that parcel, but they do need to dispose of their wastewater in a fashion that is allowed by the state. So I do really appreciate this conversation, and I'm really grateful that the Bonner County is including all of us agencies and all of you citizens in this conversation. So if anybody has questions about any of this, please feel free to contact our office. We're not here to direct the growth in one way or the other, but we just want to handle the wastewater disposal in a way that protects the drinking water and the surface water that we all enjoy every year. So.
Thank you, Ms. Goldberg. All right, next.
Sorry, I just needed a clarification. My name is Ken Myers, I'm from Sago. And I wasn't quite sure on, when you're talking at point A on accessory recreational vehicle parking space, and you have 2 permanent accessory spaces per lot there, and then you have that below it, a second accessory RV park. Does that mean within a unit or a parcel, you could have 4 units? You can only have 2?
Correct.
2.
So an accessory RV parking space requires a minimum of 1 acre. That you're meaning that your RV has to have 1 acre?
That means if you're gonna have 2, you have to have a minimum of 1 acre to have 2 spots.
Great, thank
If
you.
you have less than an acre, you can only have 1.
And other question I had was, a clarification again, when you're talking about RV parking spaces, and you're saying which may complete with electrical, water, and sewage hookups, and you cross out hookups with sewer, to control that, would those people who are going to put on an RV spot have to have Panhandle Health approval of the waste disposables that they're using?
I
or getting
believe
out?
that is their regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
My name is Todd Keppel. I'm from 464436 US 95 in Sago. And my understanding what prompted this amendment to the code was the idea that to control use of an RV on a property for more than 120 days or whatever was ridiculous. And to say that it's unenforceable is not the same thing as saying it's wrong. And I believe it is wrong. All that this change does is change 120 days really to a 1 year, which I don't see how monitoring or measuring for 1 year is any different than monitoring or measuring for 120 days. Because once you cross the line going from less than a year to more than a year, you now move into the permanent requirements. So all you've done is shift the goalpost from 120 days to 1 year. And then the definition of an accessory RV space is no definition at all. There's so much may or may nots in here that it really means nothing. As the commissioner over here mentioned, it's so ambiguous. It's ambiguous enough to where there's no clear definition of what a permanent RV parking space is. And so, as I understand it, the only thing that makes sense based on the intent of this amendment in the first place is again to strike note 11 completely, which is the intent that as I understood it. Not add the definition 12.801, not add the definition of 12-496. None of these things are in alignment with the intended purpose of bringing this amendment up in the first place.
Thank you. All right, who wants to speak next? Anyone else want to say something? Yes, sir. Oh, we got 2 on the way, so let me answer first. Go ahead, I'll go back.
Grace Bauer, 81 Kuskanukluk, City of Kootenai. Also, I want to bring up a good point that Commissioner Bradish brought up that there was in fact agency comment. The city of Kootenai, which I am on the Kootenai City Council, responded to the Planning and Zoning Commission's proposed amendments, and we did oppose them. However, this feels like a little bit of a bait and switch because there were amendments to the amendments, which are very vague and arbitrary. And one question, point of clarification I have is, when you make an amendment to the amendment after you've already posted to the public on a public hearing, don't you have to repost the new amendments and set the hearing for a different date?
That's a good question.
Only if the P and Z Commission chooses to accept those amendments. Those amendments are then forwarded to the board for another public hearing. If there were no changes made to the original document, then the board doesn't necessarily have to hold a public hearing. But if the P and Z Commission accepts those changes, so those changes are meant for the Planning Commission. If the Planning Commission chooses to accept or reject those, that's up to them this night. Then those changes are then forwarded to the board.
Also, I believe in Robert's Rules of Order allows the commission to make text amendments at the public hearing, but I disagree with Mr. Ollerton's analysis. Also, I just wanted to say personally, I think that Note 11 should be stricken, and the blue part that was added and not posted for the public to comment on should go away as well. The reason the city of Kootenai was originally opposed to these changes had to do with the water and sewer hookups. The Kootenai-Pend Sewer District is almost at full capacity, and when you increase density, then we're facing a $28 million upgrade to our facility. So that's going to be a tax burden on the people in Kootenai and Pend if our density gets pushed. So anyway, those are my thoughts. And also, I think before you guys vote on this, which I hope you guys postpone the latter text, is the first gentleman made a very good point about RVs, and doesn't the state regulate that? Thank you.
Okay, let's see, yes, sir, you were waiting in the wings.
My name is Alex Keppel. I am from Highway 95 in Sagal, Idaho. We've heard some very good, strong reasons why the proposed changes are not only wrong, but also unenforceable, with the exception of the eliminating the 180 or 120 day limitation that is necessary. But Note 11 should be stricken out. No creation of a 12801 definition, and no creation of section 12496. I would also like to express my wish that RVs can be used as vacation rentals, because as I understand it, it is not permissible to rent out one, but if you rent out two, you are now a campground. Now, if you're not allowed to rent out one, that means that you can't even rent out one without becoming a campground. And why shouldn't someone be allowed to rent out an RV to someone? How is them renting it out, one RV to someone without getting a campground license, how is that different than them deciding to live in it or let their son live in it or something? Like Thomas Jefferson said, it neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg. So why shouldn't my neighbor be allowed to do that? The only other request I would make is that the board here please consider mild, nonverbal signs of affirmation, such as applause, as long as no one is trying to talk, to consider that free speech and not disruptive, because most of the time when someone is speaking and someone gives a little applause, that does not disrupt a meeting, as long as no one is trying to talk. So I would request that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Carmen Corretoro, and I live at 88 Hawksridge Lane in Priest River. And I don't have anything prepared, but what I wanted to say is I personally believe, and I think based on comments and stuff that I read on Facebook and other media, social media, is that most people who move to Idaho want less county regulation. And we're not saying we're not gonna follow state regulations, because those have already been put out, there's nothing you can do about it. Or federal regulations, because there we're stuck. But like, we shouldn't add to things and make it worse instead of better. And I think by trying to define, instead of just getting rid of it, like what everybody said already in here too, from what I understood, you guys wanted to get rid of that Note 11. So if you want to get rid of it, don't add any more stuff. And I think because of fear of somebody calling you up and going, blah, 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 because I don't like whatever my neighbor's doing, well, it's the neighbor's property. It's not your property. So it's like, put a hedge up, don't look at it kind of thing. Instead of making, so you don't need to please everybody. You shouldn't need to please anybody. If I don't want to look when I'm driving down Spirit Lake Cutoff at stuff, then I just go right by. I mean, it's all I'm saying. And I saw this introduction to the zoning and subdivision ordinance on Boundary County, and I actually don't think this should be put onto just the zoning and subdivision, but I think on possibly the Bonner County website. And if you need help, I'll help, or I'm sure there's other people with bigger words than me. But if you make like a letter of introduction, say, hey, this is Bonner County. The people of Bonner County, we the people, like to live this certain way. And, you're gonna be on dirt roads, and maybe there's no electricity, and maybe your neighbor lives in a trailer, and maybe you won't like it. Well, come and visit before you move here. Don't buy without sight unseen. And if you don't like it, don't move. But say that in a nice way. I'm sure there's gotta be a nicer way than this, but all I'm saying is look at what another county in Idaho did, that I personally, if I would have seen this, I'm like, yes! Because I moved here from California, but I actually moved here from Romania. And I lived in Romania when it was communist, and there were no freedoms. So for me to even be able to speak is kind of scary, especially around grown-ups. Because they could make you disappear. And so that's nice not to have that issue. So it'd be nice not to have more control. Like, let's not nitpick, just get rid of it all completely, leave it alone, and if somebody has a problem, say, dude, there's a lot of trees, buy a tree. Move a tree, hide. That's all, and maybe put that in front of everybody, just on the website, because that's where people look, but in a nice way. Anyway,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to add comments tonight? Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I will.
Oh, there's one. We got another one back here, so.
Some things weren't touched on.
Okay.
My name's Adrienne Norris. Many of you already know me on Facebook. You don't necessarily know who I am, but here I am, and I'm here to say to the council, to the committee, a lot of good points were put out on both sides. Kootenai, they had a lot of valid points. The Panhandle Health had a lot of points. But I think we need to remember one thing. We're already governed by RV, okay? When it was in the manufacturer's facility, it was dictated by whoever governed it to say it's a safe vessel, or whatever you want to call it, unit, whatever. When it leaves and goes to someone's property or drives down the road, then it's governed by the Department of Motor Vehicles, okay? Now, I understand that Title 63, I believe, in the state code enables you guys to charge personal property tax on an RV, a boat, whatever, once it is not titled with the Department of Transportation. I feel like you guys are wanting to put this into the codes, the building location codes, because then you can do an inventory on every RV that's in the county. Now, I'm pretty sure this is not your objective, but we need to think of long-term objectives, right? Isn't that why we have the Constitution of the United States that is not allowed to be changed? It's because of future understandings and verbiages and so forth. So we need to remember our Constitution when we try to apply these codes. Another thing I want to bring up is we already have state laws. We have state laws that, as we've already talked about, for sewage. Panhandle Health does a great job. They don't know if the 5%ers has an illegal septic system, and it's bad, but it's just like our gun rights, okay? Just because there's a few people shooting up schools and so forth, that doesn't mean I, as an American in a democracy, should lose my gun rights. And therefore, I shouldn't lose my rights to live how I want on my property because of the 5%ers. And it's very terrible what they're doing, but it's not my problem and it's not my fault. And if it is affecting a neighbor, meaning the sewage is leaking onto their property, or they're making loud noises, or whatever, or they're trespassing on the neighbor's property to access their RV or whatever structure because it's right on the property line, then that neighbor already has laws in place, trespassing laws, Panhandle Health laws. We even have laws for electrical and plumbing. So we don't need to double govern. We moved to Bonner County, we live in Bonner County for the freedoms that we thought were in place. So let's leave it alone and go on with our lives. The last thing I want to bring up is Carmen, I believe is her name. She had a wonderful point. I am the one that went up to Boundary County and I did some talking. I explained to them I'm not trying to turn the counties against each other, but I would like to know why Boundary County, Idaho County, and many other counties in Idaho have under their codes unregulated for RVs. Why is that? Is it because there's no other regulations that require you to regulate it? So we need to think about this before we start adding unreasonable codes that don't even need to be in place when there's already government facilities or agencies that are already doing the things that you guys are concerned about. Because to be honest, what I do on my property is my business, and what you do on your property is yours, until it becomes a safety or a health concern. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm Adrienne, and I live on Spirit Lake Cutoff.
And there was one more, yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lilian, and I'm from Sego. First of all, I want to thank all of you because I know you're doing all this to improve the way of life, to improve everything for the community. But I second what the gentleman Mike said and the rest of the people, that most of the people that we move from other places to this amazing place is because of the freedom, because we don't want to deal with all the control that the government has in this country and in other countries. And the reason that people here are so happy is because we are allowed to live the way we want. We are allowed to say what we want without being criticized for anybody. And I think that the control is getting too much, that it's becoming like a domino effect, that now everybody thinks that because in the cities they're controlling even the way you breathe, then we have to do it. And that's not the way it should be. Controlling how many people can have RVs in their, or how many RVs people can have in their land, I think is damaging their way of life. There are a lot of people that they have no money to pay for a house. The construction materials increase more than 400%, and stopping people from having more than 2 RVs, you will be damaging a lot of families that they don't have the money to buy the land for the first child, for the second child, for the fourth child. and then they're living in RVs, and when it's winter, they go to the south and get a job. So I think that controlling what people do in their houses and controlling how many people can live, you're gonna be damaging the housing. And as long as the county cannot build more affordable housing for the people, we cannot decide where they can live or where they cannot live. Because if you try to get a house or an apartment in this area, it is impossible, and if you find it, it's extremely expensive. So where are going to live all those persons who cannot afford a house? Where are we gonna put them? If Mr. Smith has 3 kids and he's gonna put 3 RVs for them because they cannot build a house, are we gonna tell them, sorry sir, I know it's your land, but I don't wanna see your RVs beside my land? We shouldn't just think about us, we should think about them. What are we gonna tell them? Are we gonna buy their house for them? We don't have the right, nor the county, nor the cities. We cannot tell the people, you cannot live in your land, you cannot have another house in your land, because the housing is not affordable right now. And some people are worried about the sewage. Well, it's the same thing that if you build a house with 10 bedrooms because you have 10 kids, they're gonna use the same amount of water and sewage than if they live in a big house than if they live in 3 RVs. Some of the big houses in the lake, they spend more water than an RV can spend. So we have to think about that. Don't just think that, okay, I don't wanna see an RV because, oh, it looks bad. We need to be empathetic. We need to be empathetic as council, as city, as people. That's why this country was great, because it was United States of America. You have to be united and not just see for what is convenient to you. We have to see what is convenient to most of the people and to be realistic. The housing is unaffordable in this area. To buy a house, to build a house, and to rent an apartment. So if you can, I think it's great that you have taken the time to change that 120 days. But I think that better than just change those 120 days, we shouldn't even be ruling how many RVs a person can have. If someone is renting 10 RVs in their land, okay, they have to start paying taxes, they have to be regulated. But if you're a person, you have 10 kids, and you want to have 10 RVs because you cannot build 10 houses, I don't think why we should regulate the way of that people, or where are we gonna put them? Are we gonna have them homeless? Those persons that they live in RVs, are we gonna have them homeless because now their dad can only have 2 RVs in their houses? So I just want you to remember the name of your country. I'm Mexican, and I admire this country, and just remember your name, United States of America. So you should start being united and not just go through the flow with a domino effect. Think about the neighbors, think about the reality of this country. There are a lot of poor people, there are a lot of homeless people, and we don't want the people from here to become homeless because their dad cannot afford to build a house. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I heard the name Lillian, I didn't catch your last name.
Beltran.
Bill. All right, anyone else? Okay, if no one else wants to say something, so we'll do now. I think it's time for a stretch break. So everybody wants to stand up and stretch, please feel free.